again to Bucktown Cooks, room 108 of Owen J. Roberts Middle School. This is your local cooking show, and today our guest celebrity chef is 8th grade ELA teacher, Mrs. Dede. And she's here to share with us her mother-in-law's famous monkey bread.
Actually, it's mine.
Oh, it's yours.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I thought it was your mother-in-law's. Thank you for correcting
this
me.
Mrs. Dede's
That
monkey
Mrs.
bread.
Dede.
Yeah.
So tell us what monkey bread is real quick in a nutshell.
Monkey bread, I know that there's an historical story behind this because I looked it up, but I actually don't remember what it is. It's like little balls of dough that are dipped in butter and rolled in cinnamon sugar, so that makes them delicious.
It sounds like 1,000 donuts smashed into one.
Yes, it's like a giant donut. It's like a giant donut made up of donut holes.
Nice. The best part of the donut. Well, so we are going to be following an actual recipe because baking, we don't really just kind of do things kind of off the cuff. We want to make sure that we are following directions because baking is an exact science. The very first thing we want to do since we're baking is we want to preheat the oven, and this is preheat the oven to 350 degrees. So we're going to bake and we're going to do 350. All right, that way the oven is heating up. It needs to be at a precise temperature when we put the ingredients in. All right, so what is our first step after we've preheated the oven, Mrs. Dede?
Well, the first step would be to put the butter in the microwave.
Okay.
A full stick of butter, put it in the microwave.
Okay. And we want it totally melted, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I usually put it in for like 30 seconds and then kind of swirl it around.
Okay.
And while that's melting, I usually cut the biscuit dough.
Okay.
I cut these little guys into quarters.
So this is buttermilk biscuit dough, and this is the structure or the base of what we're doing. And one of the main skills that you're going to be learning today is how to use a knife. And you might think, duh, Mrs. Colbert, I'm 13 years old, I know how to use a knife, but actually most adults don't even know how to properly use a knife. Do you know how to properly use a knife, Mrs. Dede?
I'm going to have you show me just in case so that these children...
Okay. So we want these in quarters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
I usually just stack them because if they're not, it's actually better if they're not symmetrical, not all the same size, because then you have all different size pieces in there.
Good technique. So what I'm doing is I'm actually kind of creating like a little bit of a claw, like a curved claw with my knuckles. You don't want your fingers sticking out when you're using a knife because then what might happen is you might chop one of the fingertips off. So we curl them back, and we actually run the blade against those curled back fingers and go straight into your food like that.
Right,
you're protecting your fingers by curling them back so nothing is sticking out and running the blade directly against. You don't want anything sticking out. You run the risk of hurting yourself if you don't. Okay. Wow, this does work really well. Stack them up. All right.
All right.
We can get rid of these.
Let's check. Oh, good idea to check on the butter.
Let's give it maybe 10 more seconds.
Okay.
And what do we want to do next?
Okay. Then you take each of these little sections. You get these little wedges here, and you just roll them into little balls.
This looks like a good job for you, Mrs. Stout.
This is actually very relaxing.
Looks like a really good job for you. You guys, you just show up and get put to work. Okay, so this is melted, and I think the next thing we do is put vanilla in it.
Yeah, I put a little vanilla in it just so it all so that the kind of sticks to the dough.
So whenever we measure small amounts of liquid ingredient, we're going to be pouring it into, in this case, a teaspoon. You don't ever pour over your ingredients that are already measured. Why do you think that is, Ms. Stauffenberg?
Because it might overflow.
And if it overflows, you've automatically ruined what's already in this bowl. So you pour over a separate bowl that it doesn't matter if you overflow accidentally. Look, I've already dropped some in. And then you pour in there. And then this is done and goes out of the way. Okay, and then we'll just mix that up. And then while they're creating all those dough balls over there, I'm going to go ahead and measure. So I'm looking at Mrs. Dede's directions. It says mix the sugar and cinnamon in a shallow bowl. So we have a bowl, and we've got regular sugar, or also called white cane sugar, we have brown sugar, and then we need 3 teaspoons of cinnamon. So besides the knife skills, which we're curling our fingers back and slicing the blade directly along the knuckles, the other thing I want you to take away from this is how to correctly measure dry ingredients. It's pretty important that you follow directions because, again, as I already said, baking is an exact science. It's not something that you can just kind of avant-garde do whatever you want for the most part. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna scoop in, and I can do this with sugar. So this is a dry measuring cup versus the wet liquid measuring cup I showed you the other day with Mrs. Sullivan. Now there you can see that there's a mound of sugar over top. That's too much sugar. I only want 1 cup. So I'm taking the flat edge of the knife, flat edge of a butter knife, and I'm scraping it across the top and getting rid of any excess sugar. And then I'll dump that in. That's 1 cup. But the recipe calls not for 1 cup. It calls for 2 cups of sugar. And then it calls for brown sugar on top of it in case if you're looking for a sweet treat. So
Because brown sugar makes everything better.
yes, it makes it caramelized, does it not? So that's 2 cups of white cane sugar. I like to remove my ingredients as I use them, just to remind me of what is left to go in. Then I need 1/3 cup of brown sugar. I'm sorry, 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Brown sugar is its own thing in the way that you measure it. So you scoop it, it's kind of like wet sand. You pack it down in, unlike most other ingredients. Most other ingredients just kind of spoon in or fluff in. But brown sugar you pack in and you scrape it down. So it's gonna come out kind of like in form. Yep. So that's how we measure our dry ingredients. And the last thing would be 3 teaspoons of cinnamon. So cinnamon I'm gonna handle much the way I handled vanilla, right? I'm gonna measure it out on a different surface other than my bowl because I don't want any excess cinnamon falling in. So I'm going for 1 teaspoon here and I'm scraping any excess back in here. But notice I'm doing this on a piece of parchment paper in case if I spill any, I can dump it right back in the container and not waste. So again, I'm scooping, shaping off any excess, scraping it off with the flat edge of the knife and dumping in, and that's 2. And there we go, there's 3. And so I have the sugars and the cinnamon all mixed. Okay, Mrs. Dede.
Okay, so we're gonna mix all that together, and then at my house, we usually do this in an assembly line.
Okay.
And, and you know what, Mrs. Colbert, if you have a couple spoons, that actually kinda
Yep.
helps us out a little
What
bit.
size do we want, small or big?
Small.
Okay. You want 2? 3?
Good. All right. So I usually take a few at a time, the little dough balls, put them in the butter, make sure that they're all coated with the butter.
Yeah.
And this is why I want the spoon, so I don't get butter all over my fingers, and so I'm not putting my fingers in the butter, because that's actually probably kind of gross.
But we all do it.
Yeah, but we all do it.
Don't do that at home. Do it at home. Okay, is that
And
good?
then, yep, and then once you have that mixed up, and this is why I need 2 spoons, I'll put the little dough ball in the cinnamon sugar,
And then kind of twirl it around.
and then just kind of twirl it
Ah,
around. Make sure it's coated,
Perfect.
and then stick that little guy in the pan. And if you get a little extra in the pan, that's okay, because that's just more crunchy, fun stuff that's gonna be in the pan.
Okay.
And you just keep doing this until all of your little dough balls are, and sometimes you can put, you know, a few of them in the bowl at a time.
Sure.
And that way your helper, and my helper is often Mr. Dede, or my son, your helper can just stick them right in the pan. And then what you do, and what you want to do is you want to get them in there so you have a nice, you know, so you don't have any space, but you don't want to pack them in there too tightly, because what
Okay.
I've discovered is if you pack them in there too tightly, the ones that are like way down in the middle don't cook as thoroughly.
Oh, so they
it
end
doesn't
up
cook as
doughy.
evenly. So they end up a little too squishy. So that is our procedure for this.
For the next
And
hour.
For the next hour. No, just kidding. Yeah, it usually takes me about 20 minutes
Okay.
to go through all this. And then we stick it in the oven for about a half an hour, 35 minutes. And the way you know it's done, and I'm sure Mrs. Colbert will show you this later. The way you know it's done is on the top, it'll turn darker and it'll almost look a little crusty. You know, like when you have a muffin that's a little crusty at the top, that's what it looks
crunch.
like.
We'll
Yeah,
have
a
a little crunch
little
on
bit
top?
of crunch. So we will keep doing this, and then
Yep.
I'll show you what we do once we have it all together.
Okay, perfect.